It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. Coming up, a serious escalation as the British couple detained in Iran are now charged with espionage. Craig and Lindsay Foreman were on a motorcycle trip around the world when they were arrested. They're now being accused of cooperating with hostile Western intelligence services. The Foreign Office says it is deeply concerned. Tonight, I'll be speaking to British-Iranian Anousheh Ashouri, who spent almost 5 years in prison in Iran and was released alongside Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe. Also ahead, fly tipping on a scale you've never seen before. We look at the criminal gangs making millions by dumping waste illegally, and they see the fines as a business expense rather than a deterrent. Plus, farmers' leaders say their blood is boiling after more talks with the government today on inheritance tax changes. We'll be joined again by the farmer who was behind last week's protest that ruined a visit by the Prime Minister. And saving the British pub industry one pint at a time. I'll be speaking to the former landlord who's on a mission to visit every single pub in the entire country. All that to come and much more here on the UK Tonight. Good evening. They say they were on a motorcycle mission around the world to meet different people and experience new ways of life, posting it all on social media. The Iranian authorities see it differently, saying they were gathering sensitive information. And they've now charged Craig and Lindsay Foreman with espionage, causing real concern back here. The British couple were arrested last month, but their case only emerged last week. Iran is now accusing them of collecting information for hostile and Western intelligence agencies. A spokesperson for Iran's judiciary said the individuals arrested entered Iran under the guise of tourists and, under the guise of research and investigation work, have collected information in several provinces of the country. These individuals were cooperating with covert institutions related to the intelligence services of hostile and Western countries under the guise of research and investigation activities. These two British citizens were arrested and placed under the control of the provincial intelligence agencies during a series of coordinated intelligence operations and while collecting information in Kerman City. Well, in response, a Foreign Office spokesperson told us, "We are deeply concerned by reports that two British nationals have been charged with espionage in Iran. We continue to raise this case directly with the Iranian authorities. We are providing them with consular assistance and remain in close contact with their family members." Joining me now to discuss this is Anousheh Ashouri, who spent nearly 5 years in prison in Iran and was finally released in 2022. Anousheh, thanks for joining us. When you first heard this had happened, again, it seems like, what went through your mind?
My story. I would like, let us start looking at the bright side, because it is very fortunate that the families of Craig and Lindsay, they have started publicizing this issue from the beginning. In my ordeal, unfortunately, it took 2 years before it became publicized, and that was by the advice my family received from the foreign ministry. So for 2 years, we were waiting and nothing was happening until the Iranian regime, they realized that, well, they have got this phone, this chip here, but nobody is paying attention. So that's when they made me they publicized my case rather than it's being publicized in Britain. So the good thing is that this publicity is going to help them in a way, so that the ordeal will be soon finished, rather than being prolonged for such a long time.
Yes, I spoke to your daughter about this last night, as I'm sure you know, and there are parallels here. You were in the country, I know, visiting relatives. You hold dual nationality as well, which is different to the Foremans here. But that moment when you were arrested, what did you think was happening? Did you realise that they were trying to pin something on you that just wasn't the case?
Well, I used to go back to visit my mom, and had no reason not to go back. What I refer to my case, for example, or Nazanin case, or in this case, Craig and Lindsay, I consider ourselves as soft targets. because catching spies, it takes a lot of effort. And if you are not competent enough, what you will do is you go towards these soft targets
Yeah.
that they can, because in a way, it wasn't Anusha Ashuri who was arrested. It is not Lindsay or Craig who are arrested. It is the British passport that they are holding, which is taken hostage in a sense.
Which is why the advice from the Foreign Office is obviously not to go there. Look, Anusha, I'm not going to get you to comment on what Craig and Lindsay decided to do in travelling to Iran, but what was the advice when you headed there? Again, bearing in mind that it's different for you. You have both passports.
Yes, because in my case, because Iran doesn't recognize dual nationality, so I was not allowed any visits by the British embassy in Iran. I was considered as purely an Iranian person. Uh, Luckily, in this case, that is not going to happen, and therefore they have been allowed counseling from the very beginning.
When you were arrested, what happened immediately after that? Did they tell you why you were being arrested? Did they tell you what the charges were? And what was the interrogation like?
Well, my life, my ordeal in these nearly 5 years can be divided into two phases. One is the interrogation phase, and the other one is living in the main prison compound. The 116 days that I spent in two interrogation centers, because first I was taken to the interrogation center belonging to the Ministry of Intelligence, and when they ended up with no positive result as far as they were concerned, then they sent me to one belonging to the IRGC, and I spent 2 weeks there.
That's the
And
Iranian
when
Republican Guard, we should explain.
yes,
It's
yes,
sort of a
yeah, and
quasi-governmental group that run the place, basically.
so when they were empty-handed, they ended up. And one of the reasons, perhaps, I was sent to the main prison compound earlier than anticipated was that during my time in the interrogation center at the interrogation center 209, I reached a point that I made 3 suicide attempts. And I think that was one of the reasons they decided that it was enough. Let's send him and give him his sentence. Because their aim was not catching a spy. Their aim was, in fact, later on, we discovered that it was to do with the tanks and with the British debt.
Yes, yes, yes. We won't go into that. But the Iranian government basically thought the UK government still owed the money for several decades ago and wanted them to pay. We won't go into that too much. It's terrible to hear, Anusha, that it pushed you to the absolute limit of wanting to take your life and trying that 3 times. I have to say, grateful you're still with us today, despite that desperation. Did you see other people, experience other people who were going through such desperation as well?
When you're in the interrogation center, you're on your own, mostly. But when you're transferred to the main prison compound, then you meet many people in the same situation almost the same situation as you are. So you start sharing your own stories, and you'll see that most of the people in the hall, that it was called the spies hall, were innocent people who were, and mostly highly educated people from
Yes.
different layers of society.
Anusha, just to finish off, look, your situation and Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe's situation were terrible. We heard a lot about them when you were both in prison there and also when you were both released. Do you feel the authorities here, the Foreign Office back here, has learnt from that experience? Because a lot of speculation was said at the time that wasn't necessarily helpful. Do you think things have improved that might benefit the Foremans now?
I hope so, but I doubt it. Because even the inquiry that was made about the Foreign Affairs Committee, which we stressed very much to look into these cases, because if the British government does not look at this seriously, this is going to happen over and over again. I don't see that step being taken. So I'm afraid we might see cases like this in the future.
Anusha Ashuri, really appreciate you joining us here on the UK Tonight this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
A reminder, if you're affected by that story, you can contact the Samaritans. Their number is 116 123, or you can email joe@samaritans.org. Next on the show this evening, fly tipping on a scale you've probably never seen before. Waste crime is being described as the new narcotics for criminal gangs who can make millions by illegally dumping rubbish. Around 34 million tonnes of waste is being dumped each year. And experts say the gangs are undeterred by any fines they receive and simply see them as a business expense. As Sky's Rachel Venables has been finding out.
Past this gate and down the cliff lie mounds of rubbish, buried beneath the soil, household and builders' waste dumped en masse for years, now being sucked out to sea and spat out by the waves, all along this glittering Kent coastline.
Well, for the last couple of years, people have been dumping waste over those cliffs by the lorry load. It gets washed over the cliffs, and then with the tidal currents, it comes round and gets washed up on this beach. It's builder's waste, lots of guttering, more raw plugs, more little bits like this. It's disgusting.
80%, I would say, is all building waste or strange things like shredded carpet, shredded Christmas trees.
How does that make you feel?
It is really sad, and just the impact on the marine life and probably our lives, because if fish are eating plastic, then so are we.
Angry. I think residents are rightly angry. It should have been stopped immediately. The Environment Agency should be able to slap a stop notice on it, and it should then immediately stop and prosecutions start straight away.
With the site now closed off and under investigation, we don't know why this rubbish was dumped here. But waste crime has many forms and is a booming business.
It's thought around a fifth of all waste in England is illegally managed. That's around 34 million tonnes, enough to fill about 4 million skips. And it's costing us about £1 billion every single year, at the same time as having a huge impact on legitimate waste operators. Stuart, hi. Lovely to see you. So tell me, where are we?
So we're in our Earlswood facility, does about 500 tonnes a day. We range whole different types of waste, so fly tipping waste, old mattresses, the food waste over there, to general waste.
So obviously waste crime is a huge issue in this country. How does it work? How are people making money here?
Imagine you're a business, so I come along and I say, I'll pick your waste, I'll deal with your waste. You pay me as though I'm going to treat it properly, so maybe £50 to collect it and manage it and £100 to treat it. I pick it up, I throw it on the ground somewhere. So I'm walking away with £100 of your £150 you've paid me, but I keep as all profit.
Of the more than 1,400 illegal dump sites recorded by the Environment Agency in the past decade, 319 were thought to be linked to organised crime, but just 64 led to sanctions, prosecutions or written warnings.
What we're seeing is actually more and more evidence of the really serious organised criminal gangs operating in the waste sector. Because it's such a low-risk, high-reward activity, something that the previous head of the Environment Agency actually called the new narcotics. And even if you do get caught, the penalties are far too low and they're not enough of a deterrent.
Do they have enough resources, the Environment Agency, the police?
We don't think they do have enough resources. £1 billion problem merits a lot more than the £10 million that the Environment Agency gets to tackle this issue every year. We need regulations to be much tougher and more strongly enforced.
In a statement, the Environment Agency said waste crime is toxic. We are determined to make life harder for criminals by disrupting and stopping illegal activity through tough enforcement action and prosecutions. Last year, we successfully shut down 462 illegal waste sites, bringing the total number in operation to the lowest on record. Criminals can convert your mouldy rubbish easily into cash at an almost incalculable cost to legitimate companies, the taxpayer and our environment. Rachel Venables, Sky News.
Well, Environment spokesperson at the Local Government Association, Councillor Adam Hugg, joins me now. Good evening to you, Adam. It's disgusting, this, isn't it?
No, it's absolutely outrageous, and it's something that councils across the country are working hard alongside the Environment Agency to try and tackle. It's costing councils over £50 million a year annually in clean-up, and you've heard, it's costing the Environment Agency, they've got about 10 million to try and help tackle this, but it's not touching the sides because, as you heard, unless there is actually meaningful sanctions being able to be imposed by the courts, they're just going to keep dealing with it as a business expense. So we're very clear that we want to see, stronger sentencing guidelines to magistrates to make clear this is not just something that's a minor thing; it's a real problem. And I think, increasing the fines at the first instance, because sometimes they can be even lower than the fixed penalty notices that councils can levy. But if not, options of custodial sentences for serial offenders on this, because otherwise it's just going to keep going round and round without being able to be solved.
Yeah, there's a sort of perfect storm here, though, isn't there? Prisons are pretty much full. The government's looking at cutting shorter sentences, and you would wait for multiple times this happened. I think a lot of people who are sick of this kind of stuff, and I've had it on my doorstep where I live as it happens, want the full force of the law to come down from day one, surely.
Absolutely. That's why we want to see the fines increased significantly in the first instance. At the moment, the fines the courts are levying are sometimes below your standard fixed penalty notice that a council can levy, and that's after the amount of time that you've waited for it to chunter through to a magistrate's court to get it. So it's about clear sentencing guidelines that ups the fines dramatically from the first time they're caught. Increasing use of FPNs at a council level, and obviously support for surveillance and enforcement measures, because as you know, councils have been run dry over the last 14 years in terms of investment. So you want to strengthen that enforcement capacity. And part of that's going to be about whether the fines that are able to be levied actually are going to support in further enforcement action.
Yeah, well, I mean, councils haven't always been wise with their own investments, by the way, have they? But that's a whole other discussion we can have another time. But look, we are one of the most surveilled countries in the entire world. Why is this escaping the cameras that seem to be spotting every other move we make?
Well, I think politely that's a slight exaggeration. I think obviously cameras are in different places for different things. Obviously tackling antisocial behaviour and different agencies dealing with speeding. Obviously the police are involved in speeding cameras and stuff like that. But it's about the right resource in the right place, and ultimately the environmental health officers and others who would be doing the enforcement on the ground. Those numbers have been cut over recent years because of the impact on council budgets. So that's the reality about the enforcement capacity locally. You want the right tool for the right job to be able to go after this and identify who is causing these repeat problems, and then so need the enforcement capacity on one side, supported by potential for the fine revenue, and then making sure that the courts are being robust in the first instance, because ultimately people are just going to keep getting away with it.
Are any councils doing a good job of this?
Well, look, all councils are doing the best with the resources that they have, and obviously it really depends on the types of businesses in your area. Obviously, I represent a more urban authority where it's slightly less of an issue, but it's all about making sure that you've got the right teams in place to tackle hotspots where these happen. On the streets of a city, that is somewhat different to the big open rural areas where you saw in that programme it's causing enormous environmental damage. And can be left for some time because the enforcement capacity and the ability to identify where these hotspots are happening can be weaker than in other places. So it's about making sure that the right people are resourced to be able to go after the problem.
Because I'm sure you've seen the big problem in southern Italy where the mafia have been doing this kind of thing for years, and it's got so toxic it's leaching into the water and causing real health problems. I mean, there's a risk that if this continues to run out of control and there aren't the sanctions, that we could experience the same kind of thing here in the UK, isn't there? I
think any organised criminality in any sector is something that needs to be cracked down on and taken seriously, which is why we need those clear guidance to the magistrates that this is not just sort of Del Boy type characters who are doing this. This is actually potentially part of a much bigger problem, and I think that's why it's we've got to make sure it's taken seriously. And I take the point around the pressures on the on custodial sentences, which is why we've got to focus on making the fines significant and real in the first place. But there has got to be targeted action against the sort of the big scale criminality that is beginning to penetrate the sector. So it's about horses for courses in terms of the right tool, but we've got to make sure it's robust from the start. Councils are properly resourced, the Environment Agency is properly resourced, and that residents know where to report problems where they see it.
Councillor Adam Hugg, appreciate your time. Thank you. Still to come here on the UK Sound. We'll go live to a village in Surrey where this huge 20-metre sinkhole has suddenly appeared. Also ahead, why Thames Water has been granted a £3 billion emergency loan. And the boss of the National Farmers Union slams the government after talks over inheritance tax today. I'll be speaking to another farmer a little bit later in the show about that.
Big stories don't always come from big cities.
I'm Lisa Dowd and I'm Sky's Midlands correspondent.
You are not getting in this elevator, okay?
The judge made it very clear that she could see no justifiable reason why Sakulas wasn't here facing British justice.
I promised I would get him justice.
Free, wherever you get your news.
This is what they're up against. The wind is the really big problem. It is back-breaking work and the smoke is thick. It's been working well. Water levels are dropping, but no one knows what impact further rain will have. What would you do if this place wasn't open? This is the exact spot in Nottingham where their 19-year-old son, Barnaby Webber, lost his life.
I just think it's so cruel and so harsh.
It's really scary. We're terrified.
In this community, I'm told that everybody knows someone affected by COVID.
Hopefully this will be the last wave.
Sky News gets the full story first. Change seems tantalisingly close in this corner of the UK. Wales was the first to introduce the plastic bag charge.
It's legal to let go.
Set the speed and take the hands off.
It's almost driverless, but not quite. Hans is a highly trained police dog.
The force is incredible.
It's really frightening, actually. This is my patch, my specialism. It's also my home.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Some breaking news to bring you now, and it's sad news. The drummer Rick Buckler from The Jam has died at the age of 69. Of course, the band famous alongside Paul Weller and Bruce Foxton as well for tunes like Town Called Malice and That's Entertainment in the late 70s and early 80s. And posting on Facebook, Paul Weller has said, "I'm shocked and saddened by Rick's passing. I'm thinking back to us all rehearsing in my bedroom in Stanley Road in Woking, to all the pubs and clubs we played at as kids, to eventually making a record. What a journey. We went far beyond our dreams, and what we made stands the test of time. My deepest sympathy to all family and friends." That from Paul Weller, remembering his friend and drummer from The Jam, Rick Buckler, who's died at the age of 69. Next, residents in a Surrey village have been forced to evacuate their homes after a massive sinkhole appeared in their street. The hole first emerged in Godstone High Street late last night before growing to at least 20 metres in length, as you can see there. By this afternoon, water supplies have been cut off and one resident's garden has been completely swallowed up by the hole. Police have put in place a 100-metre cordon with people advised to avoid the area. Godstone resident Sarah Dennis joins me now. Good evening to you, Sarah. Are you avoiding the area?
Can't avoid the area. I live in the area.
But hopefully not too close to the sinkhole is what I'm suggesting.
No, thankfully, we're probably about 0.4 miles from the actual sinkhole itself, but we are a small little village and the sinkhole's kind of in the middle, so it's completely divided the village in two currently.
Wow. What's the talk of the village about this? Are people scared? Are people fascinated, concerned? What are they saying?
Probably all those things, to be fair. Obviously, there's a lot of concern for the residents that literally live right by the sinkhole.
Yeah.
And understandably so, because the sinkhole is still getting bigger and bigger and more homes are being evacuated currently. Obviously, it's interesting because something like this doesn't normally happen in the village. So obviously people want to have a look. But worryingly, we've got no water still. So even though we're not directly on the sinkhole, we have no water at all currently, which has caused quite a few issues for a lot of residents.
Oh, absolutely. What a real frustration. Like you say, people are compelled to go and have a look, but obviously they can't get too close with the thing getting bigger since last night. I mean, the curiosity is one thing, but are people remembering that it's not the safest thing to go and have a look at, is it?
100%. It's definitely not that safe. And I think looking at the pictures today and on the news, we can all appreciate how big it's becoming. And we're more now concerned for, obviously, the whole community on the whole. And obviously, like I say, those poor people have been evacuated. And as yet, we have no idea of when they'll be able to go home or even to get their personal possessions.
Yeah.
So a lot of them got evacuated last night and haven't been allowed back in their homes since.
Have you had any sense, been given any sort of an idea why this happened, or is it still a mystery?
I mean, it's still a mystery in a sense while it's happened so quickly. However, back in 2019, there was a slight sinkhole in that exact current space.
Right.
That was reported by local residents, and it was patched up, and the whole road on the whole has been patched up a lot. We do have a lot of traffic, even though it's a small village. We're right by the M25, so we do see a lot of large lorries using the road regularly. And of course, we've got the caves that are originally underneath Godstone, which probably doesn't help either. So it's probably a disaster that was always going to happen at some point, to be fair.
Yes, look, neither of us are experts on these things, but you put those things like lorries and caves in, and changes to the landscape in combination, you can probably see that something like this could quite easily happen. Just final question, Sarah. I'm guessing you've driven down that road yourself quite a few times. Do you think back and think, hang on a minute, what if this happened when I was driving along it?
Indeed. I mean, I was walking my dog, yesterday afternoon, probably a couple of hours before it did go down. No signs there to it sort of crumbling. So, yeah, it's really scary to think, that's the road all the school children go down during school time. Thankfully, we're on half term at the moment, but doesn't even bear thinking of what could have happened.
No, it's a good point. It's a bit of a slice of luck, isn't it, that it is half term right now. Maybe a lot of kids are away. And look, as far as we know, no one's been hurt as well, which is a small mercy. Sarah, appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much indeed.
You're more than welcome. Thank you.
I want to talk water now, and some of Thames Water's creditors, as well as a Liberal Democrat MP, have been given permission to launch an appeal after the High Court approved plans to inject another £3 billion into the failing water company. Thames Water supplies around 16 million households, but without extra funding, it could run out of money within weeks. It already has debts of around £16 billion, and according to MP Charlie Maynard, the restructuring deal approved today is simply throwing good money after bad.
I'm disappointed, obviously. I think it's a real pity because it's not standing up for the customers at all. So we've got 16 million customers who are going to be royally stiffed by this. Their water bills are going up £19 a month from April. That is going to be funding massive interest expenses and banker fees. It is not going to be funding our sewage treatment works and our networks, and that's where it needs to go.
Meanwhile, 5 other water firms have joined Thames Water in asking regulators to allow them to increase bills by even more than was previously granted. They are Anglian Water, Northumbrian Water, Southern Water, South East Water and Wessex Water. Now, they want the Competition and Markets Authority to allow them to charge customers even more, arguing they need to fund improvements and meet environmental commitments. This is obviously a very complex issue with no easy solution, but there's mounting public anger over the state of our water sector, with customers wondering why it always falls to them to shore up the company's finances. Now, we've asked Thames Water, Anglian Water, South East Water and Southern Water to come on the UK Tonight this evening, as well as the industry body Water UK, to simply explain why they've requested further increases in water bills. Southern Water didn't get back to us, and everyone else said no. If the bosses of those organisations are watching tonight, That invitation remains open. It always is. We'd love to hear from you. Still to come on the UK Tonight. Why farming leaders say their blood is boiling after talks with government ministers today. Also coming up, I'll speak to one of Britain's best ever skiers, arguably the best, Dave Riding, after he makes more history. And we'll hear from a former pub landlord who's on a mission to save the UK pub industry by visiting everyone in the country. Welcome back. Agricultural leaders say their blood is boiling after a meeting with the government on inheritance tax today. Ministers are standing firm on proposals to introduce a 20% levy on agricultural land worth more than £1 million. The boss of the NFU, the National Farmers Union, says the government rebuffed their proposed solution and accused ministers of not caring.
There was absolutely no empathy for the section of our community that are in the eye of this storm, that don't expect to live for 7 years, whether they be young or old. If they don't expect to live for 7 years, they have no ability to plan. There was no empathy for those people. There was no interest in what it meant for business investment, for delivering the economic growth that we're told is so important. There was no interest in protecting food production and food security. And there was no acceptance that they needed to reconsider the policy. My plea to government is, please think about those people that are living through this, the pressures you put upon them. It's unacceptable for any government to do that with a tax change and not giving them the ability to plan.
Well, I'm joined now by farmer Philip Weston, who SJ spoke to last week after he organised a protest in Milton Keynes which disrupted the Prime Minister's visit. Philip, is your blood boiling today?
Well, a very good evening to you, Matt. I think it's hard not to be, isn't it? I think the farming industry today has well and truly been left appalled, furious and let down. They've targeted at the end of the day an asset-rich, not cash-rich industry. And it's one of which members of the public depend on for their food security. And they've put that at risk today, to be quite honest. It extends far further than obviously inheritance tax. There are a lot of other costs and implications we're having to deal with in the case of the budget, but obviously the inheritance tax is the one that's going to be death, to be quite honest, of a lot of our industries.
Is your blood boiling simply with the government? Because I know you've got frustrations with some of the others involved in this, like the NFU, haven't you?
It's a difficult one. Look, Tom Bradshaw's words just prior to me coming on then, we can't deny, they are true, aren't they, at the end of the day? Our beef with the NFU, if that's what you want to call it, is more down to them thinking they represent all the farmers. At the end of the day, they only actually represent 1 in 7 of farmers in this country.
Right.
And, I think a lot of farmers have fell out of favour of them because of how they criticised what we done the other week. At the end of the day, multiple members of both Save British Farming and the NFU were present on that day. And I think even your Sky helicopter picked up an NFU banner in the background and one of the NFU members shaking one of the police officers' hands. So, to criticise and to condemn us for what we've done that day is also to condemn themselves and all other farmers, to be quite honest.
Philip, given the meeting today didn't come out with any changes for farmers, it seemed like the government and the people on their side are standing firm. Are you thinking of doing something else next? Are you thinking of working in concert with the NFU or carrying on with your own flavour of protest?
Well, look, Farmers to Action have made repeated attempts to try and talk with the NFU, try and gather their support and liaise with them. That was attempted on various occasions, but it was put down. Fortunately, nobody wants to do anything that's going to affect members of the public. That isn't on our forefront. We are here at the end of the day to provide food for our public. We are the good guys in that case. I think going forward, I can see a lot of pressure being applied to Labour MPs in the first instance, at local level. At the end of the day, they are the first to answer for the behaviour of their, quite frankly, disgraceful Labour government. And I think they'll need to seriously consider their seats going forward for future elections.
Philip, would you feel different if this was a Conservative government doing this?
Oh, God, no. Look, at the end of the day, Conservatives have failed British farmers well and truly. This misconception that the Conservatives have always been there for the British farmer, I think, let's rule that one out, shall we?
Yeah. Listen, I want to, one of the NFU suggestions was that farmers don't pay inheritance tax, or whoever inherits the farm, you've got children, if they inherited your farm, they wouldn't pay tax on it unless they sold it. That's what the NFU wants to see change. Would you support that approach?
Well, they say change, but at the end of the day, all farmers have been advised by accountants, by solicitors to date that actually you don't need to put companies into trust. You don't need to put companies into, limited companies and so forth. Stick with partnerships. That's as good a security as you need.
Yeah. But what's wrong with that changing? I mean, people who aren't farmers, who are inheritance planning, they will talk to them about a different approach. Can you make that up? And you're still a fairly young man. You could hand it down to your children and hopefully live for another 7 years and
here's a particular case for you then, Matt. Look, my father died October 21. On the advice that we received at that time, his share didn't come directly to me. It went to my mother, so his spouse. Now, I haven't got his relief. Now, this is where the misconception about the £3 million threshold is irrelevant. Because we had planned on the basis of what was available to us, I now only get that on the one parent. So the government saying that a 300-acre farm worth roughly 3 million, you can now see clearly in that instance that actually I'm only getting that 1 million threshold. So I'm not getting a combined thing of both parents in that instance. And this is where their rules, where their regulations and everything else that they've put forward is not going to work. It's going to be an extremely costly thing.
And I get the sense, Philip, it's not going to end for quite a while. I can just tell your blood is boiling, like I asked you at the start, and it's going to continue to do so.
Well,
and I'm sure. Well, I'm really sorry because we've come to time, but I've no doubt we'll speak again about this. In the meantime, appreciate you joining us again, Philip. Thank you.
Not a problem at all. Thank you.
Widely considered to be the best British skier of all time, my next guest made more history over the weekend in Austria. Dave Riding claimed Britain's best men's finish at a World Alpine Championships for 91 years after finishing 6th in the slalom at Saalbach. It's the first time a British man has finished in the top 6 since C.S. Hudson back in 1934. And I'm really pleased to say that Dave joins me now. Dave, great to see you. Congratulations. Were you aware of C.S. Hudson before this weekend?
I wasn't. I also wasn't aware of the record that I'd managed to take. But yeah, I certainly do now, and just come to terms with my performance at the weekend.
It was fun. Look, I'm a useless skier. I can't slalom, but I watched your fantastic run just before we came on air. Just talk us through what was going through your mind. Did you know you were on a good run that day? Did you know this is a belting sort of run I'm on today?
Yeah, well, after the first run, I wasn't massively pleased with my performance, so I knew I had to turn something around. And yeah, I'd spoken to the coaches and my serviceman about what we needed to change. And yeah, as soon as I started, I did have a good feeling. So as I was skiing down, I knew that I had the flow of the course and I had a good feeling coming from the equipment. But you never quite know until you get to the finish whether it's going to be the lead or not, because you never know what everyone else has done as well. So yeah, certainly had a good vibe as I was going down, but it was pedal to the metal and focused the whole way.
You've won races before, of course. You've skied at the Winter Olympics. I know you're hoping to make the Winter Olympics in a year's time in Italy as well. But of course, the big giveaway by your accent is you're from Lancashire. There aren't many mountains there. So people will be wondering how on earth you got into it and how have you trained in the meantime?
Yeah, I still wonder why I decided to be a professional skier from Lancashire. But no, it was a family holiday that first got me skiing. Passion for sport kept me in ski racing, and I just kept trying to progress, and that's what I've kept doing, still trying to do today. And yeah, just a desire to be as good as I can be every single race, whether it's the World Championships or the World Cup. And I think that's how I've still managing to do it, and how I've got to where I've got from Lancashire, yeah.
Look, we're speaking to you back home in Lancashire now, but I'm imagining outside of racing, you spend an awful lot of time training in the mountains, do you? I mean, have you got a sort of second home set up somewhere?
Not a second home as such. Lancashire's still home. I like coming home. I like to freshen up in the UK under the grey skies, you know. But no, I have a sponsor in Obergurgl in the Utstal Valley, where I've been a sponsor now for 8 years, and they take care of me when I'm in the Alps. So it's like a home from home as such, do all my training or a lot of my training around there when I can. So very fortunate that I have supporters out there who want to help me, and yeah, that's how I've made it possible.
But Dave, when you're looking around and you're seeing people who are basically born at the bottom of a mountain, they were skiing down it before they could even walk. You know, from Germany or Switzerland or France or Norway, that kind of thing. Do you feel at a disadvantage? And in some ways, does it make what you've achieved even better?
It's certainly made it tougher, I would say. I never look back now as a disadvantage because my pathway has been what it has been, and I would never change that. But yeah, when I was young, it was definitely a disadvantage then. Fortunately, since I've finished education, I've managed through my family and sponsors to base myself out there most of the time. So since then, I've really had a good crack at it. And I think it's also why I came later, because I wasn't exposed to it as a child. But now also maybe why I'm still able to do it. It's not as, it's still quite, well, not fresh because I'm 38, but it's fresher than a 38-year-old Austrian, put it that way.
Yeah, you're still fresher than me, so I wouldn't worry about it, which does beg the final question. That's got nothing to do with it. It's aerodynamic. It does beg the final question, Dave, though, that we're a year away from the Winter Olympics in Italy. Is that the big hope now, to get back there, maybe for one last time?
Yeah, I mean, I was quoted after the last Olympics saying I'd rather cry than think about the next Olympics. But yeah, certainly broken the back of the 4-year cycle, and that performance I put a lot of emphasis on that performance this year because I believed I could do better than I'd done before at World Championships. So to be able to step up like that, it obviously gives me some confidence moving forward. But still got goals to hit the last few races of this season. And then, I'll see. I'll turn my attention to ifs, buts, and maybes for next year.
Well, look, keep doing it because you're still an inspiration, and we look forward to seeing how well you do in the next race and maybe in the Winter Olympics next year. Dave, really appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Still to come here on the UK Tonight, I'll hear from a man on a mission to save British pubs one watering hole at a time. And coming up in sport, Novak Djokovic confirms his partnership with Andy Murray as his coach will continue indefinitely.
We've come to one of Moscow's Cold War bunkers. It was built as a top-secret command centre.
Being here really feels like you're stepping back in time. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
A show of military might and menace.
Courage, bravery and sacrifice will win the day.
It's a new subject. They'll learn about combat drones and some how to handle a Kalashnikov.
The Kremlin continues to put forward its own version of events, both present and past.
There's no mention of the fact that Russia invaded its neighbour. That's rewriting history, isn't it?
Now we are to read it carefully.
Vladimir Putin put forward his plan for a ceasefire in Ukraine, telling Kiev, pull out of your eastern territories and the war will end. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Vladimir Putin is already the Kremlin's longest-serving leader since Stalin. The question is, what will a fifth Putin term mean for Russia and the world?
Why do you support Vladimir Putin, Mr. Segal?
I can't answer questions that stupid.
I've watched Vladimir Putin attempt to create a new world order.
The St. Petersburg Economic Forum was the backdrop to Vladimir Putin's latest verbal volley that Russia could send missiles to other nations to target the West.
Ambassador, I wonder, shall we have a quick word for Sky News?
Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine?
Swedish media, oh my God, you're not afraid of being here.
American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, who was first on display.
Russia says Evan Gershkovich was caught red-handed, but has never produced any evidence to back that up. Sky News. Get the full story first.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
Welcome back. Coming up, I'll be speaking to the former pub landlord on a mission to drink in every pub in the country. Sounds a bit expensive. But first, Chris is here with the sport. Good to see you, Chris. We teased it just before the break, but it looks like Novak and Andy is the partnership that's going to be the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah, big story this. Indefinitely is the words that Novak Djokovic has used after they paired up last year, November time, just 3 months after Andy Murray hung up his racket for the last time as a player. Teamed up with Djokovic to coach him towards the Australian Open. He's won so many of them. He needed one more to get over the line for this big target that he's got that we'll get onto. It was a trial period at the time. He roared through the Australian Open, got to the semi-finals, but then, 37 years young, injury flared up. We were just talking about injuries in the ad break then. And Djokovic had to retire hurt against Alex Zverev at the time. And when he walked off court, he was asked about this agreement that he's got with Andy Murray, how long will he continue? And he said, we need a period to cool off. I need a period, he needs a period, and then we'll come back and discuss it. It appears they now have discussed it. It's worked really well, and he says they'll continue indefinitely. Andy Murray, so animated on court when he was a player, always shouting and looking up at his player's box. But when he's a coach, he's so chill. real relaxed vibes, like Ivan Lendl when he was coaching Andy
Yes.
Murray, like Amelie Mauresmo when she was coaching Andy Murray.
Yeah.
And it seems that he's taken a lot of that on board, and it seems to be working for Novak Djokovic, although I should tell you, in his comeback match today from the Australian Open last month, he was beaten at the first stage of the Qatar Open by Matteo Berrettini, but, you know.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, early days, because, look, Novak, arguably the greatest, probably is the greatest. He's got his eye on bigger prizes, hasn't he?
Yeah, it's interesting you say probably the greatest, arguably the greatest. He can't say for certain that he is the greatest because he's on 24 Grand Slams. And if you go back in tennis history, that is level with Margaret Court, an Australian who won all of her Grand Slams. For anyone who doesn't know what the Slams are, it's the Australian, the French, Wimbledon, the US Open. He's got 24, she's got 24. So one more, starting with the French Open in May, he would be able to say, without doubt, I am the greatest of all time in tennis. And that's what he wants. Let's have a look at the rest of the sport.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
You got more chance winning the lottery than making it as a professional footballer.
Player now, they have much more responsibility.
I've heard all the stories, anecdotes from old friends.
I think your responsibility is to guide them in the same direction as I went myself.
The route to the very top.
Everyone would like to be a footballer, but there's only a certain few of us that are lucky enough to go and be that.
Young people devastated once they've been released.
I'm forever searching for Matthew.
I've seen how the academies work.
Success is reaching your full potential.
From different areas of the pyramid.
Thank you to everyone at Exeter for all you've done for me.
It's clear this country is producing good players. But are we giving them the whole package? I want to help. I decided to get some more advice on education. This is Bryanston School in Dorset. Richard Jones is the headmaster here and has some big ideas that could work in football.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Thanks a lot, Chris. Now, it is no secret that the UK's pub industry has been struggling since the pandemic, if not before, and new figures show just how bad the crisis is getting. The British Beer and Pub Association says 6 pubs closed for good every week last year, resulting in around 4,500 job losses. Well, my next guest is on a mission to change all that. Former landlord Dale Harvey has set off on a challenge to visit every pub in the UK in an effort to boost the industry. So far, he's had a drink in more than 5,000 pubs across the nation, and what he's calling the Great British Pub Crawl. And I'm very glad to say that Dale joins me now. Dale, good evening to you.
Good evening.
Are you sober?
I'm sober, yes. It's my days off. Monday, Tuesday, my days off.
OK, good to know, because when it's not your day off, tell us what you do.
I get out to as many pubs as I possibly can all around the country. I write reviews on them. I do a YouTube video. I do TikTok videos for them. Just try and raise spirits, really, and pints, obviously, but just try and raise awareness of the pubs that are in different towns and cities and what they've got to offer.
I'm guessing you don't drink spirits because you'd fall over after 2 or 3 pubs, I imagine. What do you do when you go to the pub? What do you order?
I mean, sometimes come the end of the night, I've got an odd spirit in there, but, you know, I steer clear as much as I can, usually a half a pint. So that way it allows me to get round double the amount that it would if I drank pints, and obviously cost me half as much. So there's a method to the madness.
There is. Can we talk about the impacts on your health and also your wallet? Health first. I mean, you have to be careful here. We're not advocating people go out and do this kind of thing. What you choose to do is your business. But is there an impact there?
Health-wise, I have regular checkups and things anyway. On my days off, I am regularly down the gym and trying to lay off things as much as I can. But having been a pub landlord or been in pubs since I was 16 years old, so 20-odd years, I honestly believe I probably drank more when I was a landlord than I do now, because now the mission is about showing how good the pubs are, doing a video and showing what the pub's got to offer, more than about me getting drunk. So I'm on a 12-hour day, and I'm probably only having a half. I'm doing 20 pubs. That's 10 pints across 12 hours. It's not as bad as it sounds.
And I'm guessing these are more sessionable brews than your sort of
always.
6,
You
7,
have
8%. Yeah, you have to. Okay. But what about the cost? Because look, you know, a pint is what, £7 in a lot of places these days. I mean, that racks up.
Yeah, it can be. To start with, obviously, before the YouTube channel was monetised and a thing, then we weren't being paid anything for it, and it was just a hobby coming out as a sideline. But now, fortunately, it's got to the stage with the YouTube videos and things like that where it's paying for itself. So it has picked up massively in the last year or so, and hopefully what we're doing is having an effect on the business. We do get messages from landlords every now and again that say, after your video went out, a new influx of people have come to see the pub and said that they saw it on your channel. So it's kind of paying for itself now, which is good.
Quick fire, what's your favourite pub?
Favourite pub? I'm a craft beer drinker. So there's a little micro pub in Ashby de la Zouch called Brew that I've got a little place in my heart for. But I also like old historic ones, and I could really off 100 of them.
Without naming names, any really terrible ones? Because every town's got one.
Oh, there was. The worst pub I ever went in, I reviewed, it was in Sutton in Ashfield in Nottinghamshire, quite back far when we started. And it was pretty bad. It was no real pub furniture, just had patio furniture, pool table lights, but no pool table, every glass panel smashed out. Oddly enough, it closed 3 weeks later and mysteriously caught fire when the planning permission was denied to turn it into flame.
We've all been to places like that. In all seriousness, 500 of the pubs you've been to have already closed down. We started at the top there with a number of jobs that are under threat. I mean, that must bring a tear to your eye.
It does. It brings a massive tear to my eye. To think that if I've done 5,000 and 10% of those have gone already, that just highlights the needs that we've got at the moment to do everything we can to save our heritage. The pubs are British pubs. It's in our culture. It's ingrained in us. And at the moment, I don't think we're doing enough. The government aren't doing enough. And I'm not settling this on the new government. It's been a long-term thing. It's been a long time that the hospitality industry hasn't been looked after when it should be.
In the meantime, Dale, if people do bump into you on your pub crawl, do you get a round in?
Oh, always.
Good to know.
A lot of the time, fortunately, people come to me and say, would you like a drink? Which is lovely. It's lovely to hear.
I thought that would be the case. Dale, really appreciate you joining us, especially on your day off. You can get back to the gym now and get ready for the next
Thank you very much. Yeah, back to the gym.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Dale. OK, that's all from me on the UK Tonight. You can catch up on all the highlights on our webpage. Up next on The World, it is, of course, Yalda Hakim. I'll see you again tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. Bye for now.